My name is Rachel Monroe. I am 33 years old, and though people see me now as a woman with sharp blazers and steady heels, I still carry the echoes of the 16-year-old girl who was told she no longer belonged in her own home. I live alone, in a quiet apartment on the north side of Minneapolis, the kind of place filled with warm morning light and the hum of my own independence. I built this life piece by piece through sleepless nights, ramen noodles, rejection letters, and the stubborn belief that I was worth more than the story others wrote for me. No one gave it to me. I carved it out of survival. That afternoon, I had just returned from work when I heard the knock. It wasn't rushed, wasn't timid. It was firm and titled, and far too familiar. When I peered through the peephole, I froze. There stood my mother, Evelyn, the woman who had once tucked me into bed and later turned her back on me. And just behind her, arms folded and chin raised, was Steve, her husband, the man who slowly became the gravity that pulled her away from me. I hadn't seen either of them in over 15 years. My body reacted before my mind did. My hands trembled as I unlatched the door. I opened it, but I didn't move aside. I wanted to know why they were there, why after years of silence, they felt entitled to stand on my threshold, as though they'd never abandoned me. Rachel, my mother said lightly, as though we'd spoken yesterday, not half a lifetime ago. We need to talk. Before I could respond, Steve brushed past me into my apartment. His arrogance was the same as when I was a child, a man who never raised his voice yet somehow filled every room with cold dismissal. My mother followed him in offering a small, nervous smile. I didn't invite them to sit. I didn't ask how they were. I stood tall, arms crossed, waiting. Steve spoke first. "We heard about your promotion. You're doing well for yourself now." His tone wasn't congratulatory. It was transactional, the way a banker acknowledges an account balance. I gave a slow nod, my stomach already bracing for impact. My mother chimed in quickly as though rehearsed. "The twins are starting college this fall. Things have been tight for us financially. We were hoping you could help." Her words hung heavy in the air, absurd in their simplicity. For a moment, I thought I misheard. Help after everything. They weren't joking. After all the years of silence, after choosing new children and leaving me behind, they were standing in my living room asking me to finance the very lives that had cost me my own family. Disbelief swept through me, then something colder, clarity. They hadn't come to apologize. They hadn't come to reconcile. This wasn't about love. It was a transaction. And in their eyes, I was finally valuable enough to matter again, not as a daughter, but as a wallet. What they didn't know was that I wasn't the forgotten girl they had left behind. Not anymore. I remembered the years before Steve, when it had just been me and my mom. We were poor. Yes, living in a 2-bedroom rental above my grandparents' garage, but we had each other. She was tired all the time working as a physical therapy assistant while finishing school, but she tried. I remember her reading me bedtime stories with her voice cracking, the smell of cheap ramen simmering in the kitchen, the way she kissed my forehead when she thought I was already asleep. She wasn't perfect, but she was mine. Then Steve happened. He wasn't cruel, at least not in obvious ways. He was simply dismissive. He entered our lives quietly, and in time, everything revolved around him. Dinner conversations that once brimmed with laughter and questions about my day turned into monologues about his job, his stories, his needs. If I spoke, it was like whispering into an empty room. My mother's eyes began to drift further away, not with anger, but with distance. I was slowly fading from her world, replaced by the man she chose to build a new life around. When she became pregnant with the twins, I felt hope. I imagined being a big sister, teaching them to read, showing them the silly songs I used to sing. I babysat around the neighborhood to practice. But as her belly grew, I disappeared entirely. She forgot my 13th birthday until my grandmother reminded her the next day. She stopped asking about my classes. Even our movie nights, our little ritual, vanished. By the time the twins were born, I was a ghost in my own home. I scrubbed dishes, kept my grades high, tried desperately to earn back a place, but nothing worked. It wasn't just attention. She shifted away from me. It was affection. She became a mother again, but not to me. And then came the night they told me to leave. It wasn't explosive. No shouting, no slammed doors. Just Steve's voice, calm and steady, as though he was asking me to pass the salt. Things are tight. The twins need more. It's probably best if you move out. Stay with your grandparents until you get on your feet. I remember staring at my mother, searching her face for contradiction, for a plea for anything. She said nothing. She only nodded. That nod cut deeper than any insult ever could. I packed a bag in silence. A few clothes, my journal, a photo of me and my grandmother. I stood in the doorway of my childhood room one last time. It already felt stripped of me. And then under a cloudy night sky, I walked to my grandparents' house, the wind cold against my cheeks. My grandmother hugged me so tightly I thought I might break. "I knew this day was coming," she whispered. My grandfather muttered angrily in the hallway, "Unbelievable. To throw out your own child." I didn't cry, not then. I only felt hollow, as though I had been erased. But deep inside, a flame flickered. They had chosen to erase me. But I would choose to exist anyway. Survival at 16 doesn't come with a manual. I remember staring at my grandmother's old floral curtains that first night, wondering how a child was supposed to become an adult overnight. The next morning, my grandfather placed an envelope on the kitchen table, $40 in cash. "This is all we can spare right now," he said, his voice heavy with shame. "But you'll figure it out. You've always been strong." Strong. I didn't feel strong. I felt like a discarded object passed from one hand to another. But my grandmother's embrace gave me something to hold on to dignity. She whispered, "Don't let them decide your worth, Rachel. You'll prove them wrong." So I did what any abandoned teenager would do. I hustled. I worked evenings at a diner, scrubbing tables until my back ached. I tutored younger kids for $20 a week. I learned how to stretch a dollar until it screamed. At school, I wore thrift store clothes but held my head high, determined not to give anyone the satisfaction of pity. Every A I earned was another brick in the wall I built between me and the people who had thrown me away. But the nights were the hardest. I would lie in bed listening to the ticking clock and the distant hum of my grandparents' old fridge, and wonder if my mother ever thought of me. Did she lie awake too, missing me? Did she glance at my empty chair at dinner and feel regret? Or was she too busy with bottles and diapers and Steve's endless demands? I never got an answer. She didn't call, she didn't visit. Holidays passed, Christmas, birthdays, and there was nothing. The silence was louder than any words. It carved into me a scar so deep it became part of who I was. The years that followed shaped me like steel under fire. College wasn't easy. I had to fight for scholarships, juggle jobs, and survive on caffeine and grit. But I got through it. Every rejection letter pinned to my wall became fuel. Every no I received became a challenge. I studied finance, not because it was glamorous, but because it was power, the kind of power I swore I'd never let anyone take from me again. By 25, I landed my first big break at a consulting firm. It was grueling 60-hour weeks, bosses who tested me, clients who doubted me, but I thrived. I was no longer the forgotten girl in secondhand shoes. I was the woman who could walk into a boardroom and command attention. I built my career brick by brick, scar by scar. And yet, every milestone carried a shadow. When I bought my first car, I thought, would Mom be proud? When I signed the lease on my first apartment, I wondered, would she even care? Success felt hollow when the person you once loved most didn't want to witness it. Then came the turning point. At 32, I secured a deal that brought my firm a multi-million-dollar client. My promotion made headlines in our industry, and suddenly my name was on people's lips. For the first time, I felt like the world saw me. But so did she. That knock on my door months later, my mother and Steve standing there asking for money, wasn't an accident. They had been watching, maybe through gossip, maybe through family whispers, maybe even through social media. However they found out, they came not with love, but with outstretched hands. "You've done so well," my mother said that day in my living room, her voice falsely sweet. "We just need a little help with the twins' tuition. They're such good kids, Rachel. They deserve a chance." Deserve. The word burned. Did I not deserve a chance at 16? Did I not deserve a mother's love, a home, a family? I stared at her, at the woman who had once braided my hair, who had laughed with me on nights we made popcorn and watched old musicals. She stood there now, a stranger cloaked in entitlement. Steve, of course, didn't bother with pretense. "You're successful now," he said coldly. "It's only fair you give back to the family that raised you." I laughed then, sharp and bitter. Family, the family that threw me out like trash. My mother flinched, but Steve didn't. His jaw tightened. "It was the right decision. You were a distraction. The twins needed stability. And look at you now, you turned out fine." Turned out fine. As though abandonment had been a gift. As though their betrayal had been some twisted favor. I felt the rage boil, but beneath it was something steadier clarity. They had come expecting the desperate girl they had once silenced, but I wasn't her anymore. I leaned against the table, my voice calm but edged with steel. "You think you can erase 16 years of silence with a tuition bill? You think money can buy forgiveness? You're wrong. You didn't raise me. You abandoned me. And now you want me to pay for the children you chose over me." My mother's eyes flickered with something, shame maybe, or fear, but Steve's hand tightened on her shoulder, steadying her, silencing her. For the first time in my life, I realized the truth. My mother wasn't the one in control. She never had been. It was Steve. He pulled the strings and she danced, even if it meant sacrificing me. And I knew then if I gave them what they wanted, it would never end. That night, after they left my apartment with stiff shoulders and hollow threats, I sat alone in the silence. The city lights outside my window blurred into streaks of gold, and I felt the weight of years pressing down on me. I had waited so long for my mother to show up, waited for an apology, for recognition, for some sliver of the love I once believed in. But now that she had come, all she brought was debt wrapped in entitlement. I poured myself a glass of wine and opened the old shoebox I kept tucked away in my closet. Inside were remnants of the girl I used to be. Photos, notes, scraps of memory. There was one picture in particular, me at age 12, grinning with missing teeth, my mother's arms wrapped tight around me. I stared at it for a long time, wondering how that woman had become the one who stood in my apartment demanding money for children I barely knew. The next day, Steve called. His voice was clipped, businesslike. "Rachel, I'll be blunt. If you don't help with the tuition, it'll get around that you turned your back on family. People talk. Is that really the reputation you want?" I nearly laughed. Reputation, I had built mine from ashes without his help, without hers. I had faced humiliation, loneliness, hunger, and survived, and now he thought gossip would scare me. He didn't know me at all. Still, his words stirred something deeper, fear. Because what he was really threatening wasn't my career, but the fragile balance I had finally built inside myself. If I allowed them to guilt me now, wouldn't it be like being 16 again? Powerless, voiceless, erased. I decided to take control. I called Rachel, not me, but my attorney friend, with the same name I'd trusted since college. I told her everything. The visit, the demand, the threats. She listened quietly, then said, "You don't owe them a thing, not legally, not morally. But if you want peace, you need to face them head on, no half measures." Her advice stayed with me. I spent days wrestling with memories, with grief, with rage. At work, I carried on as though nothing was wrong, sealing deals, leading meetings, smiling at clients. But at night, the 16-year-old girl inside me screamed for justice. Not revenge exactly, justice. It came to a head one Sunday afternoon when my mother showed up again. This time she came alone. She stood at my door, clutching a manila folder, her hands trembling. I let her in, though my chest ached with dread. She sat at my table, opened the folder, and pushed papers toward me. College brochures, loan applications, payment schedules, all neatly highlighted. "Rachel, please," she whispered, her voice raw. "They're good kids, straight-A students. They deserve a chance." I stared at the papers but didn't touch them. "And what about me, Mom? Didn't I deserve a chance at 16 when you chose him and them over me?" Tears filled her eyes. For a moment, she looked like the mother I remembered, fragile and human. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she said, her voice breaking. "Steve convinced me. He said you'd be better off with your grandparents. He said I couldn't handle 3 kids. I was scared, Rachel. And I made the worst mistake of my life." Her confession cut deep, because it was the closest thing to an apology I had ever heard from her. Yet it wasn't enough. Words didn't erase years of silence, of birthdays missed, of being treated as disposable. I leaned forward, my voice trembling but firm. You didn't just make a mistake. You abandoned me. And now, after 15 years, you only came back because you need money. That's not motherhood. That's manipulation. She sobbed quietly, her hands clutching the folder like a shield. I don't know how to fix it, she whispered. You can't, I said softly. You can't rewrite the past, but you can stop asking me to bleed for wounds you created. For a long time we sat in silence, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on us. Then she gathered her papers, stood, and walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned and whispered, I do love you, Rachel. I always did. I just didn't know how to show it. And then she was gone. I collapsed into my chair, shaking. Her words were both everything I had longed to hear and nothing I needed. Because love without action is just air. It doesn't feed it, doesn't shelter it, doesn't heal. That night, I decided I would not pay for the twins. I would not buy back her affection. I would not let Steve dictate my life anymore. If she wanted a relationship, it would be built on truth, not money. But part of me wondered if that decision meant I was closing the door forever. The week after my mother's visit felt strangely quiet, like the silence after a storm that destroyed half the town, but left your house standing. I kept expecting another knock on the door, another phone call, another demand wrapped in guilt. But days turned into weeks, and nothing came. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to breathe. I poured energy into my work closed. Another deal treated myself to a new pair of shoes I didn't need but wanted. On the outside, everything looked polished. But inside, I carried the ache of that final conversation with my mother. Her words, I do love you. I just didn't know how to show it, echoed through my mind, both comforting and cruel. Because love without presence is absence. Love without protection is abandonment. Then one evening, as I walked home from the office under a gray Minneapolis sky, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered, Rachel. It was my brother, one of the twins. His voice was deeper now, no longer the toddler I had last seen. It's Daniel. I froze. For a moment, I couldn't speak. How did you get my number? I managed. Mom gave it to me, he admitted. She said you refused to help, but I just wanted to talk to you myself. I leaned against a lamppost, my pulse quickening. And what do you want from me, Daniel? His sigh crackled through the line. Not money. I mean, yeah, college is expensive. But I wanted to hear your side. Mom never talks about you except like you're some ghost we aren't supposed to mention. And then I saw the news about you, your promotion, the article. I wanted to know if you're really the monster Steve makes you out to be. His honesty disarmed me. For a long time I stayed silent, torn between anger and a strange aching curiosity. This was my brother, the child I had once dreamed of reading stories to the baby I'd never gotten to hold. I'm not a monster, I whispered finally. But I'm not your savior either. What happened between me and your parents, it wasn't your fault. But it wasn't mine either. I was 16 when they threw me out. 16. And I had to build everything from nothing. Now they want me to pay for the family they chose over me. Do you understand how that feels? There was a pause. Then softly, I think so. Steve's not easy to live with. And I always felt like Mom carried something heavy she never told us. Maybe that was you. My chest tightened. In his voice I heard not accusation but the faint trace of connection. I can't pay your tuition, Daniel, I said gently. But I'll tell you this. You don't have to let their choices define you. You can carve your own path, just like I did. He exhaled a shaky sound. That's all I needed to hear. Thank you. The line went dead, but my heart stayed restless long after. For the first time, the wall between me and the twins cracked, not because of money but because of truth. A month later, the inevitable happened. Steve showed up at my office. He arrived unannounced in his pressed shirt and smug expression, walking past the receptionist like he owned the place. My colleagues glanced up curiously as he strode straight into the glass-walled conference room where I was reviewing numbers with my team. Rachel, he barked, ignoring everyone else. We need to talk. My spine stiffened. I excused myself and closed the door behind us. You have no right to be here, I said, my voice like ice. He sneered. You think you're better than us now, but let me tell you something you owe us. Your mother carried you, fed you, raised you until you were 16. You wouldn't be here if not for her. The least you can do is pay it back. My blood boiled, but I stayed calm. Raised me until I was 16. That's not motherhood, Steve. That's probation. And she didn't raise me, you erased me. You convinced her I was expendable. And now you think I'll bankroll your life? Never. He leaned closer, his breath sharp with anger. If you don't pay, I'll make sure everyone knows how ungrateful you are. Your clients, your colleagues, your friends. You'll be ruined. I almost laughed. Ruined, I survived being thrown out as a child. I survived hunger, loneliness, nights of wondering if I mattered. And you think a rumor can ruin me? You don't know me at all, Steve. I built myself without you, and I'll never owe you anything. His face reddened, his jaw clenching. For a moment, I thought he might strike me. But then he turned on his heel and stormed out, his threats hanging in the air like smoke. I stood alone in that conference room, my reflection staring back from the glass. For the first time, I didn't see the abandoned girl or the scarred teenager. I saw a woman who had turned betrayal into strength, who had faced her ghosts and refused to bow. That night, I wrote a letter, not to Steve, not even to my mother, but to myself. I wrote, "You are not defined by their rejection. You are not the sum of their demands. You are whole because you chose to be." And as I folded the letter and placed it in the shoebox with the rest of my memories, I felt the past finally loosen its grip. The story didn't end with reconciliation or revenge. It ended with me reclaiming myself. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. If you've stayed with me through this story, thank you. If it touched your heart, I ask you to like, share, and subscribe so that others who have faced betrayal can know they're not alone. And please leave a comment below to share your own story. Because healing begins when we stop carrying our pain in silence.